All right, well, it's 1 o'clock Eastern Time. It's time to get started. Hello and welcome to the Alpha Anywhere demo and Q&A. I'm Dave McCormick from Alpha Software. Pleased to be joined, as I am most Wednesdays, by our lead solution engineer, Dean McCormick, no relation. Dean will be showing you some examples today of things that you could do in Alpha, but more importantly, he and we are here to take your questions. So if you have any questions, go ahead and type them into the questions box of the GoToWebinar control panel. Another thing you should know, this and the other sessions of these demos are recorded, and you can find them at videos.alphasoftware.com. So let's get started. Dean, I'll just pull you off mute. Hello, Dean. Are you there?
Doing great. How you doing there, Dave?
Excellent.
Coming through okay?
You sure are. I'm going to go ahead and make
Thank
you
you.
the presenter.
Excellent.
And you should see a dialog box.
Yeah, waiting for it. Waiting for it.
All right. Is it? Oh.
There we go.
All right.
That should be starting to come through now.
Yep, and I can see your screen.
Excellent, excellent. Well, hey, thank you, everybody. Again, each week I'm really overjoyed to see the number of people who take time out of their busy schedule to spend with us. And, you know, this weekly session is about you. Our goal at all times is try to help our developer community do more, take more advantage of the Alpha platform, and really get a better understanding of what it can be what the Alpha platform can do, and what they might be able to use to satisfy their business requirements for their customers, their bosses, their enterprises. So things are really going great. As everybody has probably seen, the official release happened last week. So we now have the official Alpha 5 or Alpha Anywhere V12 version 4 of that. So I guess Alpha Anywhere version 4 is now available, and available on the official download location. Lots of really great stuff in there. We'll be covering more and more of that as we go along. We'll be doing an upcoming session on CSS and all the new changes with the Web Design Builder, and a lot of the other cool features that are coming out. And man, new features already slated and ready to go for releases later this year. So the team is very, very busy. As I said, and as Dave said, this is about you. So please take the time, if you have questions, to go to your GoToWebinar control panel, go to the questions area and enter your questions. Dave will be monitoring that throughout our session and lining that up and getting them out. And we also like to say thank you very, very much to individuals that send us questions before the webinar. And in fact, today's presentation, which will be today and next week, comes from one of our, let's call them our loyal listeners, who had a question about how to do something, and so we built some content around that. So if you have burning need to get an answer of something, we obviously can try and address it here, but also you can send it to guides@alphasoftware.com, and Dave is monitoring that, and he'll be recording that and bringing it up. So today what I'm going to do is spend about 10 minutes introducing you to a topic and going over a quick demo, and then we'll finish it up next week, because I definitely want to leave time for everybody to see more and more about, or time this week to make sure that you have questions, or your questions can get answered. So the topic for this week, and again comes from one of our listeners, is Google Charts. As you know, Alpha has a built-in charting capability, and it's very powerful, it's very strong, it works great, and it's highly integrated into the system. But also, since Alpha is an open development platform, meaning that we make it easy for you to include third-party libraries, third-party controls, third-party capabilities, Google Charts is an ideal example of that. So what I'm going to go through is a quick demonstration of how you can take, first, what are they, where to get the information about them, but also, more importantly, is how you can easily integrate them into your system and use Google Charts. One thing I will say is that the Alpha built-in charting would be my first step when I'm doing charting, because it's all built in, there's nothing arcane about it. You can use a point and click kind of methodology to build it. But what I have found is a lot of people feel it's a bit dated in its look and feel. And so therefore, when they're looking for nicer looking chart setups, they look at Google Charts. And in fact, actually, let me show you something else here. I am going to focus on Google Charts today, but we have integrated other chart systems such as AmCharts, Fusion Charts. They have one, and I'm going to actually show you another image right here where there's another one. Let's see. Oh, there we are. Okay, bear with me real quick and go to my test server. And this is actually when we were talking about that, this is where the question came from. Was I was doing a demonstration of what you could build with this to a new user, and they were wondering how I could integrate these kind of charts in it. And you'll notice that this is a live, actually it's a test server, but it's a live production system. And you'll notice that we have these nice little charts in here, and these are Google Charts. And so the question is, well, how could I, include those nice-looking charting capabilities into mine? Notice that they're a little bit nicer in terms of color, look, and feel, and they have the dynamic element of when you hover over pieces, it actually shows you more details. So that's where it came from. So what we're going to do is spend some time to talk about that today. Now, the benefits of using Google Charts in particular versus other charting libraries is, first and foremost, it is free. There is no licensing cost for Google Charts. It's something that they use internally, and they, basically exposed it to the outside world, built a whole library around it. So free is always a nice thing when you're trying to keep a tight budget when you're building systems. So that's one of the core benefits, is it is free. It looks great. They have a wide range of different styles and charts and types. You can see some of them pictured here on my screen. And they keep adding new ones as they go along. And there's extensive documentation and examples online. So when you go to the Google Chart area, which I'll show you in a few minutes, they have a lot of sample charts. They have all the information how to customize those charts, etc. But it's pretty straightforward to put together a chart and get it included in your system very, very quickly. Now, a couple of the key things you need to understand about Google Charts versus Alpha's built-in charting capabilities. One is the charts are built on the client, not on the server. So actually JavaScript runs on the client, either the web browser or the mobile device, and that generates the chart content right there on the device. So it's very fast, it's very quick, and it's leveraging a lot of the horsepower of the local device, either the web browser or the mobile device, to render that chart. But remember, if it is generated on the client, then it's kind of, you're in JavaScript world. So we're going to be talking a little bit about JavaScript. It's not complex, it's actually pretty straightforward, but definitely when you're working on the client side, you're in JavaScript. Again, as I mentioned earlier, if you're using Alpha's built-in charting capability, those charts are actually rendered on the server, and a lot of it is point and click. You really don't have to write code or write any JavaScript to get that to work. So when you're analyzing this and deciding which way to go, kind of use that pro and con of, maybe little different looking charts, nicer, but a little bit more work to put them together. Not a lot, but a little bit, and we'll be going over that there. The other is that it requires Google's JavaScript libraries. They have some core libraries and then a series of libraries that are specific to charting. And I'm going to go ahead and show you how you make sure that Alpha knows to include those. And again, that's one thing the development team did, is that they made it easy. Instead of you having to write a bunch of JavaScript and take care of stuff, you can click a few buttons and it will include those libraries with your project so that they're already ready to go on the client, and then you can then, of course, write the little pieces of JavaScript to actually display the chart itself, meaning that's the integrated support in there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a demonstration here, and it actually consists of I'm going to kind of do it step by step to kind of show you how it works. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going back over into my development environment. I have it running, but what I want to do first is I'm going to take you first to the Google Charts area, and so it's developers.google.com/chart. This is the home page for the charting development, and as you can see, it has a huge amount of galleries where you can look and see the different types. You can see the customizations. You can have a lot of guides that are built in here that talk about how do you do it. So it talks you through a quick start, and it shows you an example. And we'll be using this, an example of how you would do this on a regular web page without using Alpha, you know, if you were using on HTML. By the way, this exact same code works well on an Alpha A5W page, so that's pretty good. So that, you know, we're going to use this sample data here, and I'm going to walk you through how. But the important thing is that, as you can see, there's a chart gallery in here. So I'm going to focus on that pie chart because that's the simplest one, but they have a ton of different charts that are available. So pretty much any kind of style of chart, including some nicer looking little tables and stuff like that, is available to you as a developer. And all the documentation on how you would implement those, what are the parameters, etc., are at developers.google.com/chart. So that's definitely going to be kind of your go-to place to find out more information about how to do specific settings, like if you want to change how the titling is done or how some labeling is done, you'll go to this site to learn a little bit more about that to include into it. And as I talked about before, what this, Google Charts is all done on the mobile device or the desktop, I'm sorry, the web browser. So this is an example of it. So you basically have an HTML page, and in here you call a couple, first you load some Google Charts information, you specify the libraries here. Again, Alpha takes care of a lot of that stuff. And this is the real heart of it here, where you have a function where you create a data table, which is a internal kind of like a array that Alpha or that Google uses, set some options, and then you draw the chart into a div onto your thing, on your web page. So we're going to use the same code because we basically are, the real trick to this is we're going to dynamically generate this code inside Alpha, and that's the beauty of being able to do it, because we can leverage their technology and then make it dynamic by, say, populating this information here in the data table. Instead of having it hard-coded, I can dynamically create it from like reading from a database, and I'm going to show you how to do that. So again, when you're interested in information about Google, go to developers.google.com/chart, and that will have all of it, including the samples. You can literally copy and paste this information to a A5W page, run it, and it works great. It's really well done, and I like their documentation. Pretty easy to handle from there. Now, I'm going to go into the Alpha development environment, and I've already created a UX component, one of our form components. For people who are new to Alpha, a UX is our form component, and I've already kind of built and put in place some examples, and I'm going to walk you through each one of these as we go from there. So first and foremost, when you're doing your charts, how Google works in, let me go back to their documentation. When you, Google will generate the chart, basically the graphic for you, but what you have to do is tell it what div, a div, which is a HTML kind of placeholder, where you want to put that chart in. So in my UX component, the first thing I did was I created a little piece of static text here. So I went to the other controls, static text, clicked on that, and then I just put in this little piece of code here. So I put in a div, and I gave it an ID called chart div, and for now I just put in some text between it, so when you first run it, you're going to see where that chart is going to appear. And what will happen is when the Google script or JavaScript runs, when it generates that chart, it's going to look on your page for the div that has this ID, and it's basically going to insert between there, it's going to replace this text with that chart. So that's the first thing you need to do, is have that chart div, and you can call this anything you want to. In fact, you could have multiple divs on your page if you like you saw on my first demonstration. But the important thing is to remember what the name of that div is and feed that name properly, and I'll show you in a few minutes when you actually generate the chart code to render this from there. So that's step number one, is that you need to go and put that static text there. Now, as I mentioned before, let me go back. I'm sorry, I keep jumping around, but let me go to here. Google requires some, basically requires some JavaScript libraries to run. And normally in a normal, like you were just coding up a page, you would put in this little code here to say, hey, go out and get this library and make sure to bring it in. Well, what's really nice, and also you'll notice there's another one here where it's loading up what's called the core chart library too. Well, what's nice with Alpha is Alpha's already kind of done a little of that heavy work for you. So the first thing you need to do, and this is super important for everything to work, is you go to your Web Projects Control Panel, then you go to your project properties. And this will open up a settings for this project. And the important thing you need to do is go down to, where is that? Right here. Excuse me. JavaScript libraries. And you'll notice one right here called Include Google JS API Library. This is a core library that Google it's the core functions, and then they build on top of it. And so if you're going to use Google Charts in your project, you need to make sure to go to Project Properties, find Include Google JS API Library, and click this button. When you do it normally, when you start a new project, this is going to be unchecked. You need to make sure to check it. And so therefore that's going to automatically include that library when it publishes it to the server. So if anybody uses this project, say on their web browser, behind the scenes, Alpha is automatically saying, hey, I'm going to include this Google JavaScript library for whatever you want to do with the Google stuff there. So that's step one. So that tells the system to make sure to include that library when you deploy that to the server and then consequently down to the mobile device. Now you need to also go to the particular UX where you're building the chart and go to the properties part of it, and again scroll down, and you will find down here that in the JavaScript area where you can normally add linked files, there is a parameter called Google Visualization Libraries. So the core library is like a project level thing. That way any UX is going to have that core library. But for the UX that you're going to actually put in the graphic, i.e. draw the chart, you have to go to your properties of the UX, go to Google Visualization Libraries, and click on there. And you'll notice that there's a series of them. The most common one is called Core Chart. That's what I'm using there. But you'll notice that there's other libraries that are available to do tree maps, org charts, timelines, etc. And again, when you're looking at their documentation, it's going to tell you which one of those are required. So you'll notice in this little text here it says, oh, it needs the core chart library to be able to draw this type of chart, which in this case is a pie chart. So what you need to do is if you're going to do a certain type of chart, you have to understand which of the libraries are required by Google and then check them off. And you can have one or many of them. The benefit of this is that if I'm not going to do gauges or tables or tree maps, well, no big deal. I can just non-enable them, and therefore it's only going to download this library. And that's important from performance. You don't want to download things to the browser that you really don't have to. So you only want to select the libraries to include. So now by doing those two steps at the project level, including what's called the JS API library, and here clicking at the UX level, going to the Google Visualization Libraries and click Core Chart, click OK, boom. What I've done is basically told Alpha, hey, I'm going to be drawing a Google chart. Please include these libraries, and it takes care of that for me, so I don't actually have to write that code. So now I've done kind of what would be considered the, I've done a bit of the, what would be called the background work. Next, I'm going to go ahead and start to show you how you can start rendering the charts in there. So Dave, just want to do a quick process check to make sure that I'm coming through and my screen's refreshing properly before I go to the next step.
Yeah, I'm sorry, but your video dropped out about 15 minutes ago. Sorry, I'm doing a late April Fool's on you, man. It's coming through perfectly.
Oh, okay. Oh, wow. I mean, well, we can restart. I've got it memorized, so we're good to go.
Nope, coming through.
That's funny. Not funny. I want everybody to raise their hands who thinks that that is not funny and you should never do that again. So use your go to Webinar Control Panel and send Dave a message that's not funny. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and run this, and I'm going to go ahead and go into Working Preview. And you'll see here that in here I have that div. Remember, I put that text div right here. So the div itself is just designating an area here, and then it has that temporary text that's in there from there. Now if I click Show Chart, you'll see that almost instantaneously it generated a chart right here. And so you'll see that I have a chart here that uses the same data, And you'll notice that it has all the hover over effects, all that really nicely, all that built into it. So that's method number one. And this is a pure JavaScript call. And I'm going to show you that one first. Then I'm going to show you with this second one, I'll click that again, and you'll see nothing really changed, but the reality is it redrew this. But this was done using an XBasic callback, and this one's also going to use an XBasic callback to show you how I can kind of start building this chart dynamically. And then the last thing I'll show you is how to then show the dynamic chart, but with data from a database. And so it's actually going to draw this. So you'll notice that's JavaScript there. If you go to here, you'll notice that when I clicked here, the numbers changed because I made a XBasic callback, fed it some new numbers, and then you'll notice here it changes once again because in this case, and you saw probably that little momentary where you saw the little processing, because what it did is it did an XBasic callback, called the database, prepared the data, and then showed it on the screen. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over 1 and 2 today, and then next week I'm going to finish up by showing these two because I want to make sure we leave plenty of time for questions, and I don't want to overwhelm our meeting for today. So I'm going to walk through these two buttons, which is a pure JavaScript implementation, and then what's called a AJAX callback version of that. And then at that point we'll pause, go into questions, and then next week I'll finish up with these two here. So let me go ahead and go back into my design environment, and you'll notice that button there. And I'm just going to go, and I'm going to modify these so they're a little more are what we'd call descriptive. So JavaScript only. This one right here is fixed chart, XBasic callback. And then I'm going to go here, I'm going to say show dynamic chart, build chart, and then this last one is show dynamic chart, and I'm going to put here, let's see, this one right here, I'm going to call it database. Oops. Yeah, database. Okay. So let's first focus on this first button right here. So I have that button, and as you know, to add, for people who are new to Alpha, this is our UX builder. On the left is all of our different code and commands. In the middle is the structure of my UX or form. And on the right is the particular properties for this button. So what I was doing there was changing the button text so when it's shown on the screen, it'll have a description in the button text itself. Now I'm going to scroll down and I'm going to go to the click event. And what I want to do is when I click on this event, I want to run a JavaScript command that'll update this chart. So if I click here and open up that click event, you'll see that all it's doing is calling a JavaScript command called chart1. And that's all it's doing is running there. So that's all that button is doing. Now, where that JavaScript function is here. You'll notice that I have a function in my JavaScript here of function chart1. And you'll notice that this is essentially, I copied this from the Google Web Chart. So if you'll notice, I just merely copied this information out here, copied it, went over here, created a function and pasted that code in there, and that's all I needed to do. Now, obviously, this is a hard-coded chart because built into this JavaScript is my data elements, so my mushrooms, onions, olives, etc. So every time I run this chart, I'm going to get the same thing. But what this is showing is that what I've done now is when I do a working preview and I click on this button, it runs that chart1 and there. And you can see how fast it is because there's no server questions. It just immediately runs at JavaScript. And so if I wanted this to look a little differently, I could go back into my JavaScript function and let's say mushrooms have increased to 6 and pepperonis are 4. And so all I've done is modify the JavaScript for this, and when I go into working preview and run this, you'll notice that it now renders it with some different numbers because I modified those numbers in there. So I just wanted to show you that you could literally take Google Charts, if you make those two assignments, JS API and the core chart, and then just paste a function in there for JavaScript, you can add these charts right to your system. Now again, they're static in nature, but you know, let's say you had a static chart where you just wanted to show a cool looking chart, you could easily do that and have that running. But again, that's of limited usability because every time you want to change data here, you literally have to go in and modify code. And so what we want to start talking about is how we can do that dynamically. But before we do that, the most important thing we need to do is explain how when you click a button here, you'll notice that it is doing a JavaScript command, so everything is happening here. But when I click this button here, it actually makes a callback to the server, then runs that JavaScript. So that's what I'm going to walk through next. And then at that point, I'm going to put a stop and then come back and start showing you how you can dynamically change the data of that chart during the callback. So I hope people understand this is JavaScript only, hard-coded right there on the as a function call. But now I'm going to start talking about how I do this fixed chart. Okay, so I'm going to go back to my controls. I'm going to go to my second button here. I'm again going to my properties over here to the click event. And you'll notice that instead of running a piece of JavaScript right here, I'm actually performing what's called an action JavaScript called AJAX callback. So what this is going to do is when I click this button, it's going to send a command back to the server, and then the server is going to send back JavaScript for the browser or mobile device to run. So it's kind of the same thing as running JavaScript, but instead of having it hard-coded in the page itself, I can get it from the server, and then the server will send it back. So let's go ahead and open up this and see what it says. Okay, so I have a function here called fixedChart. And fixedChart is a function that I created that lives on the server, that when this person clicks this button, the device will call back to the server, say, hey, where is fixedChart, the function, run that function, and then whatever that function generates, send back to the mobile device or to the web browser. And again, that's all I did was put in this thing called fixedChart. Now let's go ahead and cancel out of that, and now let's go over to our XBasic functions, and you'll notice that there is an XBasic function here called fixedChart. And it's actually a very simple function, because all it does is basically, you know that when I was in JavaScript function, I had this JavaScript function right here. Well, in the case of my XBasic, all I did was take that code, put it into one big variable, and return it as the result of this function call. So what's going to happen is when the person clicks the button, makes a call back to the server basically just says, oh, okay, here's a bunch of JavaScript, and when this is sent back to the server, it's going to create the function and on the fly run it right away. And so when I'm here and I click here, it's essentially running the same JavaScript here, but instead of having it hard-coded in the local in the UX, it basically is calling back to the server to get that information. So for instance, and this is the heart of it, is that I can come in here and change these over here inside my XBasic function, and then the next thing that will happen is when I click this button, you're going to see that the chart has been updated with those new numbers. Now again, what's going on in this situation here with these XBasic functions is this is essentially hard-coded JavaScript. So what I'm going to cover next week is I'm going to show you how instead of having this hard-coded, I can dynamically build up this string or this JavaScript command, and here substitutes some live data in this area instead of having hard-coded data. But the thing I wanted to make sure you understood was that it's all JavaScript. Basically, we're dynamically building this JavaScript and handing it back to the mobile device, and when the mobile device gets this information back, it then runs these functions and creates the graph on the fly, or the chart on the fly. And the difference between this button is that it's calling a local JavaScript function that's already been pre-created. The second button is making a callback to the server and running and basically generating that JavaScript and sending it back to the front end to then run at that point in time. And that's where you get into the dynamic element. Because that is generated on the server, I can now use XBasic to dynamically build that JavaScript and therefore be able to send it back. So I'm going to go ahead and stop at this point. We're about half past the hour. I want to leave the rest for Q&A. Obviously, if there's questions about what I've shown you right now, please go to your GoToWebinar control panel. This is really the first step. We'll really get into the meat when we start looking next week at these next two buttons, where instead of having a fixed set of JavaScript, we're starting to dynamically build that JavaScript on the server side send to the front end. Now the cool thing about this, and I want to just give you a heads up, is that there's a lot of moving parts. I mean, we basically have an XBasic callback, and then we have some JavaScript. Once you've done it a couple times, you're going to be in good shape. And what I'll do is I'm going to take this UX component and a SQL script that actually will create a little sample table for you, and I'm going to get that over to Dave so we can have it at the beginning of the show, or beginning of our webinar next week, so people can download that and install it on their own system and be able to play around with this, because it's really fairly genericized. So it's just all in this one UX called Google Chart _UX. So again, we're going to go ahead and break here on this subject. If you have questions about what I've talked about already, please give them to Dave. If you have other questions, obviously, please do that. And what we'll do is next week we'll pick it up from here and show you how we can then dynamically build that data and populate that chart.
Excellent. Well, we are light on questions, so if you know, we have quite a few people here. So if you have other questions, we have a couple, but if people want to submit questions, now would be an excellent time to do that. Otherwise, we end early, and that's no fun.
Yeah, it's no fun at all.
That's no fun at all. So here's just a sort of a more general question, and it was just someone had gotten an email offering from us with version 4 that you can get some one-on-one mentoring is something that we offer, and they had asked, and I know you know about mentoring. Is this a set curriculum, or what does mentoring involve?
Oh, good question. Actually, I've been doing a lot of mentoring. I really enjoy it. It's a very fun and productive and just satisfying kind of process. Mentoring is really focused around what the end user is trying to do, or the developer is trying to do. So when we start mentoring with individuals, we first get an understanding of what they're trying to achieve, because often they have a base level capability of Alpha, but they're just a little unsure on how to do certain things or how best to set up a certain type of architecture. So what happens is we discover that in the first session to kind of find out, hey, what are those things you want to do? And then the mentoring involves both a little bit of training to say, okay, here's an example and this is how you do it, similar to what we do on our weekly Q&A here. And then also the mentoring can extend into actually hands-on working with the individual to build out or to fix an issue or to build a certain piece of functionality. And it's kind of a give and take, the two people working together to build the Alpha solution to achieve the end goal. And we find it's very effective. It's very, cost effective, because instead of spending 5 or 10 hours trying to figure out how to do something, usually within an hour we have an idea and it's kind of solved and we're off to the races. So mentoring can be very powerful in terms of a time saver for individuals, because they don't have to struggle to try and figure it out on themselves. And also with the mentoring staff and crew, we have a wide range of individuals, including access to developers. So if the mentor doesn't know how to do something, they have the resources to quickly find the answer and bring it back to the individual who's doing the mentoring, or the mentoree, I guess it would be, to help them out. And we find it's very powerful because it accelerates the development cycle. It gets rid of some of that frustration of, man, I'm stuck, I don't know how to do this, I don't know how to approach it, have I done it in the right way? You have someone who's there to kind of walk you through it, look it over, and make sure that you're developing it in a way that is both easy, but also more importantly is maintainable and good in terms of matching what Alpha, or how Alpha approaches that. So our mentoring system is, we're continuing to grow that. We're actually working on training up other mentors because it's becoming more and more popular. People find, again, it's something that helps them accelerate, break down blockers, and really allow people to be much more productive.
Excellent. So with the release of version 4, we have a couple of questions that have come out about that. One was that if they already have Alpha Anywhere installed, can they install it a second time, version 4, and have two different builds installed on the machine at the same time?
I believe so. I mean, I've only had one. What I usually do, to be honest, is I use virtual machines, and therefore each virtual machine is essentially its own little environment. I'm just kind of paranoid that way, is that I want to make sure that everything kind of stays compartmentalized. But my understanding, I know on the server, on the Alpha App Server, you can have multiple Alpha App Servers running at one time on a server, you know, with different versions. And I believe you can do the same thing with Alpha, but I'm not sure the exact process in terms of designating during the installation process. So I could look into that if people are very interested in doing that. But I just use a virtual machine concept to spin up a different virtual machine and install it there. And especially if you're just kind of experimenting with it, it's more of a sandbox, so you're not going to harm anything that you're working on, and you don't get any strange things that happen that. So don't know the exact answer. I can look into it and find out a little bit more how you would put two different development systems on a single machine or a single virtual machine environment.
Excellent. And sort of the follow-up to that is, can you do it with one license? And I think that's, I don't think we have any problem with that.
Yeah, I don't think so. I have not had that myself there. And, you know, what I do is, obviously, we have an official release as of last week, but as we move along, Alpha submits and puts out pre-releases, which are really not meant to go into production because they're not fully vetted and tested. They're just to get out there to show people what's available and to get them to start using it and to educate themselves on what it is. So I use those pre-releases, but I'm very cautious in terms of like using them in a different virtual machine. So I make sure that I kind of contain it and manage it properly.
Terrific. A couple other questions we have here. Here's one. Is there a recommended software as a service framework for Alpha Anywhere?
Ah, interesting. Well, we have
one from
hosting.
David, yeah, but I think David Cates has created such an application.
Ah, yes, I see. Yes, the template.
Yeah.
Yeah, actually, I know of two.
Okay.
One is that still available on the website? The one that Alpha generated and produced.
It's not available from us, but you can get it from the original authors, I think. If you have a if you do have a specific question along these lines, right? Exactly. If you send an email to guides@alphasoftware.com, we can put you in touch with a couple people who have got software as a service frameworks for AA, which could give you quite a head start on what you're building. Right. I remember PetSiClick, right? Was
yeah, they leverage their NOS.
Mm-hmm.
Yep, and also remember too, you also have Steve Wood has created a framework, and you can go to alphatogo.com and find that there. Not sure why it's taking so long to get open there. On their system's running a little sluggish today, but Steve Wood also generated one that has a number of people who are using it, which is also a framework. So it kind of speeds up the development of your. You know, you don't have to build all the pieces. You kind of start with a good set of there. So. Man, why is that?
Right. Someone just pointed out that our new format for saving your components is now in a JSON format where it used to be binary.
Yeah, isn't that cool? That's such a neat little feature.
Because it means
that opens up a lot of really neat stuff. Yeah, it's great for version control because now you can kind of diff to controls, although I know it's going to be fairly complex anyway, but that's been a common request is that, hey, if it's a binary, I really can't see what's inside it, so I don't really, it's kind of like a black box, but when it's JSON, you can inspect it. You can look at it in a text viewer, and also you can do things like diffs between two controls to see what's different between them from a textual standpoint. So that, and also you should check out, there's a video on the web, on the release notes for custom controls. So you now can start generating things dynamically within Alpha, so not everything has to be essentially kind of static. So let's say you had a form with like 4 text boxes and a button to submit it. Previously you'd have to generate 4 text boxes and a button. Now you can actually dynamically build that on the fly, which is going to open up a new kind of cool features for people being able to create more dynamic solutions, less hard coding. It's pretty exciting kind of stuff there. Yeah, I'm not sure his site might be down a little bit, or I might be having a connection problem. But Steve Wood has generated another one there. But yeah, we'll be talking about those and showing you. Actually, next week, I have the pre-release on one of my other virtual machines. I'll open it up, or I'll have the new release on there. I haven't migrated my core machine over, and I'll show where you can look at that JSON data. It's very intriguing, and it has a lot of potential.
That's great. So I've got a map question, and also a nice
Oh, good.
basic question. We'll start with the map one, and it's a simple one. And does the UX component work with Google Maps?
Um, yes, it does. Specifically, and I'm going to go back into my development environment, and I'll go ahead and open up a demo I just did recently. And in the UX component, you can add a data control, and you can find it under Data Controls Map. And this is essentially a Google Map placeholder. You put it on there, and then you can display a map inside this panel card. And so when you put that control in there, you can set some default information. You can tell what kind of map type it's going to be, a hybrid satellite terrain. You can tell it whether to have zoom controls and all these other things here. And so essentially these are all the parameter setting for the Google Map to be shown on here, including, check this out, optimize route waypoints. So you can actually feed it multiple markers, and it will do an optimized route waypoint for you. To use this, how you do it is that once you have that map placed on there, you can literally go ahead and put like a fixed location on it. If you want, you can center the map on a location, and then when you open that up, you could type in the latitude and the longitude of what that location is. Or more importantly is you can dynamically show that map. So I'm going to scroll up here a little bit here, and I've got a button here called Map It. And that button there uses a action JavaScript. So I'm going to scroll down here to the click event. I'm going to open this up here, and you'll notice that I've got two actions actually going on. First is it's going to navigate using the panel action to this panel card where the map is shown. Then it's going to do what's called a Google Map Method UX component. And this is a very, very, very powerful action JavaScript, action JavaScript. So let me open this up. And so you notice the first thing it's asking me is which map. I could have had multiple map controls on my UX, so they could be in different panels. And so you could have like 2 or 3, you could have as many as you want on there. The action name I'm using is called Add a Marker to the Map. And I'm getting the location information from controls on the component. So it's actually going to take component controls that are sitting on the component and use those to generate it. And then I have marker settings here where I'm just keeping the generic ones, but if I wanted to, I could do a whole bunch of stuff about giving it a URL, a title, detail, overlay circle, plus I could set up some JavaScript so like when you clicked on a marker. So let me go ahead and show you how this works real quick, do a little quick working preview. And basically this will generate in a moment. So I've got I can click on a contact here, and then I've got this button here called Map It. And you'll notice I have address of London here. When I click Map It, it renders the map and puts their address on the map, in this case London, because that was what was on the screen before. Now I can go back, click on, say, this person here, and they're in Strasbourg, is where they're located at. So I'm going to go ahead and click my Map It button, and you'll notice now that I'm in Strasbourg, because what it does is that it's using whatever that current control is set up, those text boxes, to feed that. But what's really cool about this, and you really want to experiment with it, is that when you create, you can do things like the route, but this is where it gets really interesting, is that when I go to my button Map It, and I open up my action JavaScript for this, I could add multiple markers to the map. I could show and hide markers. I can center the map. I can set zoom levels. So I have complete and total control over how that map operates using action JavaScript. So I don't have to write any code or anything like that. I can merely go in and just set these different setups, and it will walk me through how to do that. Now, for more advanced individuals, you can actually use XBasic to actually configure and set up there. You can also use JavaScript commands. Alpha included a lot of nice JavaScript commands that allow you to do things like adding multiple markers to a map. So long-winded, and I appreciate the question, is that absolutely we can do an enormous amount of stuff with mapping on the UX control merely by dragging this map component onto my UX and then using the Google Map Method UX component to then interact and manipulate that map while it's running. So it's a lot of fun to play with, and there's a lot of good sample videos. And again, where I like to tell people, you're interested in getting a video on how mapping works, go to Help, go to Video Finder, type in map, and you can see that we have a whole set of things like UX component. This is placing a map here, displaying driving directions, tour methods exposed by the map control. And then there's also showing you how, and you'll notice it has some example components and things like that that are included in it. So you don't actually have to recreate the component. You can just download it, and you may need, for instance, this is the sample airports database, so you'll put that data into your database so the component will run. But a lot of really good videos to walk through how to use the map control in the UX, and it's a lot of fun. And don't forget either that when you have a grid control, grids also have a built-in mapping component where it will map the values in that grid and show what's called an alternative view for mapping. And again, if I go back to my video finder, go back here, you'll see grid control, mapping and geography. It walks you through step by step how you can use the grid control also to create mapping applications, and you can do it very quickly. I actually did a demonstration for a potential client a couple days ago, and they had literally spent weeks and weeks building custom, like they had a dispatch operation where you would have a whole bunch of dispatch like work orders, and what they wanted to do was show those work orders on a map and then basically do what's called geofencing, where you would draw a box around a group of them and then manipulate the data for that groups. And using the grid control, we were essentially able to do that whole function within an hour or two. It was all kind of built into the alpha piece. So check that out, the grid component, because the neat thing is if you're more familiar with grids, you know, once you kind of use that, understand how to show the map, you can manipulate things in the grid very quickly. And then if you need to use it in a UX, then go to the UX component map control and walk through these videos, and you'll get a really good education on how to do that. So great question. Thank you very much. And I hope this shows you a little bit more of what you can do with it. It's very simple to do these, especially since Alpha took the time to basically go in and create these action JavaScript. And really what's going on is that we've encapsulated a set of JavaScript commands that are sent to the Google Map to tell it what to do, where to display itself, what parameters to show, whether to show driving directions and stuff like that. So instead of you sitting down and writing a whole bunch of JavaScript, basically the team put it in Genie, where all you have to do is kind of point and click, and it takes care of generating the JavaScript for you to update that map.
Cool. So another couple of questions. Another map question, actually, which is, will the map component work with latitude and longitude if you're doing offshore locations, or is it just addresses?
It works with both. You'll notice that, yeah, basically, it depends on what you're going to do with the map, too, map technology. Absolutely, you can use addresses, and those will be automatically geocoded, and then, because everything gets distilled down to latitude and longitude. So when I actually am running this, when I do this controls to read, behind the scenes, it's taking that address information and translating that into a latitude and longitude using a big lookup. They have this massive database where they can determine what the latitude and longitude is from an address, and that's called geocoding. So that's being done automatically by the system. But you're not required. If you have actually latitude and longitude in your database, you can use those directly. You can say, instead of controls to read, I can basically look at those columns and say, use this latitude and this longitude to do that representation on there. And then a third thing, which is really, really powerful, is that, and you'll see it if you go through especially the grid map control and the component there, modern databases, SQL, MySQL, etc., they have a special kind of column types, and they're geographic or location types, and they're really cool because they allow you to do searches based on, so if you've encoded it with these special column types, you can do queries against geographic locations in a way that allows you to say, okay, give me all the things that match within 1 mile of this latitude and longitude. And actually the videos I was talking about, and if you go here to Help Video Finder and do the mapping geographic searches, it's actually built into the grid and it shows you that. And these sample databases you download to show these things include that column type. And it really makes for some very, very, very powerful sort of geolocation searching capability. And what's neat is that, again, Alpha has encoded it so it takes care of all the heavy lifting. So you can use either the built-in capability or some nice little XBasic commands to generate that kind of capability. But you can use either physical addresses, which then get translated for you automatically into latitude and longitude, or you can use latitude and longitude directly and use that to display the information on the map.
Excellent. Wow, there are a lot of map questions today, actually.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah.
And
it's fun stuff.
And here's another one, which is, how do you pull in your current location on a map and show, a map marker?
Good point.
Yeah.
Okay, excellent point. I'm going to go back to my button right here, and I'm going to go to the Google Map method, and you'll notice that the action name was add a marker to the map. The get location or address, check it out, device location. So this is a pre-built-in capability. And you'll notice that it's called, I'm using high accuracy, which means it's going to take, and then here are my timeouts. Because let's say the device can't, for whatever reason, doesn't have a GPS signal or a Wi-Fi signal that it can pick up, then it may just time out where it says, I really can't find where you're at. But that's all you have to do is to show your location on the map. You just do the device location. And you'll notice down right here, this talks a little bit more about how to do that. It's going to actually read the location from the device that you're on, and it'll do its best bet to place you on that location. So you can actually run two Google Map methods to add a marker to the map of your location, and then run another one to add, say, some markers within such distance from where you're at. But that's all built into it, because built into all of our UX components is the pre-built go out and acquire the location from the device capability. It's kind of hard in the background and exposed through these things, so it's very, very simple to do that.
That's great. And if I recall, there's also an HTML5 way of getting that information as well for a web application that is using PhoneGap. But that's right.
That is correct. The only downside, just as a heads up for people, is that I believe it's most of the times when you're running the browser, it's going to say, do you want to share location with this page?
Right,
because it's
an extra pop-up that can be kind of annoying if you're using it.
Yeah, so that's why PhoneGap, the neat thing about PhoneGap is that if you wrap it in PhoneGap, it's going to ask you that once, but then it's going to remember it and allow you to do it. If you're in a web browser one, I think it will kind of ask you over and over where you're, if you want to share your location information. And for users, that might get annoying. So you have to kind of just decide how you'll be using this. If it's a casual person, no big deal. But if it's going to be used over and over again, you may want to look at maybe using PhoneGap, which is very simple to do, to wrap your app and put it together there. But all of this is built in so that you don't have to write a whole bunch of arcane JavaScript code or something, like literally on here. And you know what? I'm running here. Let's go ahead and give it a try. It might be able to pull it off because of my IP address or something like that. So let's give it a try. Again, I'm on my laptop, so may not. So I'm just going to pick anybody because it's now I'm going to use that. I'm going to click map it, and if this shows up in Austin, yeah, it may not because I'm not really running on a device. I'm running on a laptop in my development environment. It may not come up. So not too exciting of a demo. Now, if I were running on this using the remote test on my my mobile device, it most likely would show me the location based upon that information. So much for that demo. That didn't get exciting there.
Excellent. So for next week's session, which you said you'll be showing us how to pull in data.
Yep.
We had a question.
And dynamically build that chart.
Right. We had a question from someone who's wondering if that will involve the use of pointer variables, and their question specifically is that they use Fusion charts, which isn't Google Charts. But
Yes.
And it builds the chart using JSON. You're probably familiar with Fusion charts. I think we
Yeah,
talked
I've
to you about
done
those.
I built, yeah, I did
Yeah.
stuff around the Gantt chart. Yeah.
Oh, excellent. So the issue this person is having is dimensioning the XBasic pointer variable to use in the JSON generate method.
Interesting. Okay,
So
I think I might be able to do a little damage on
take a
that
look at
next
that.
week.
That would be great. Yeah.
Yeah, again, I've used the same technique. Its cool thing is that more and more, and you'll find this with almost any system, JSON is becoming the sort of the preferred way to feed data to a routine in JavaScript. Now, what's very interesting, and I'll go back to my Google chart just to talk about that, is that you'll notice that they use a construct called a data table, and this I think has been around for a while. And so you create basically a data table, which is sort of, just think of it as an array, a special type of array. So you have two columns, the topping and the slices, and then I add my rows, so I'm adding basically an array complex here. And so that's how Google did it. But more and more, most people are saying, no, build a JSON string here and then pass it this JSON to then display the information. So this would be more JSON. And the cool thing about this is, and I love that, and the reason I love it is that what you can do is when you're using XBasic, you can build up what the gentleman talked about was a pointer array. And we'll show an example of that next week. And then when you have that pointer array, this pointer array would be basically, essentially the same thing here of a column of topping and column of slices. What it will do is you can run the JSON generate, and it will convert that array into JSON that can then be used by these other parts. So the programming challenge becomes, and it's really straightforward, is you build an array that matches the JSON, and then it will automatically put it into JSON format. And arrays, once you get a handle on them, are really easy to code. They're very powerful, they're very fast, and they're easy to set up and kind of do it. So I'll talk and touch upon that a little bit next week. And again, I think there is a way to use JSON with Google Charts, but I think it's a few more steps. The way I'll show you this is kind of more of a simpler way to do it since it's fairly static. But things like AM charts, and as they said, the Fusion charts, you pass it a JSON string, and it uses that JSON to then generate the graph and the format and the chart and the data and everything else. And once you get a hang of it, it becomes very simple to use, and it's very powerful. So I'll cover that. I'll spend 5 to 10 minutes on how to do that next week, so we can kind of expose it to the other people. Because I think what you're going to find out as the world moves, the world is starting to resolve more and more around JSON. Like for instance, when Alpha decided in the latest release to create a text version representation of the controls. So instead of having it be first it was binary. So instead of writing it in some weird text, they actually made the decision of, no, we're going to store the description of this control as JSON, because there's so many ways you can then manipulate JSON, and it's an industry standard. So I highly recommend, if you haven't spent much time with JSON, do spend a little time experimenting with JSON, and especially looking at the commands JSON parse and JSON generate, which are built into Alpha, which will take a pointer array and turn it into JSON, and then vice versa. And you'll end up, once you go through that, you'll end up realizing where you're going to use it more and more and more as you go forward. So I'll definitely break out, after I do the first part of my demonstration, kind of wrap that up, I'll talk a little bit about JSON, how you can then create it, etc., and the pointer array and things like that. Okay?
Terrific. Someone rightly points out that when it comes to Google Maps, they have a free version and they have the paid version, which is fairly expensive at around $10,000 a year.
Yeah, and business license. That's the same way with the mapping too.
Yeah, with the mapping, right? And so with the mapping in particular, they said that you can have Google pull up the latitude and longitude for you, but what they do is do it very slowly, like don't overwhelm the system. Otherwise, it makes it pain, and you'll need to pay. I've also known of other people who have been building mobile apps who've explored using Bing, because I believe that their mapping system was far less than that. I think it was like $3,000 per year. So it might be a consideration if you're building an application. And
there's also an open source map too.
Oh yeah.
Let me see if I can bring that up real quick. Let's see if it's on here. Yeah, I think it might be open. Yeah, I think that. And the cool thing about that is that, especially when you're geocoding, i.e. translating an address into a Latin language, there's definitely restrictions on, like, I think it's like 25,000 a day, which seems like a lot, but if you're doing, showing maps with a team of people in a dispatch, you're going to start chewing through that, a lot in the future. So yeah, definitely you want to kind of plan ahead. Otherwise, you might go, oh, I have to pay a bunch of money to Google to be able to really exploit their mapping capability. But it depends on the demands. I mean, if you're only generating a couple hundred maps a day, you're not going to be hitting that limit. But the other part of it too is that what Google does is, like, when I'm in here, it's taking the control. So like in this situation, I've got I'm basically using the address, city, and country here to map that. So it dynamically does the conversion for me, which counts against me. I could have pre-processed this information and therefore save along with the address. I could geocode that address when I save it and save it as Latin LAN. So then I don't have to geocode it anymore. I can just feed the Latin LANs to the map itself. So there's some different strategies of basically how you do that geocoding, and there's a lot of built-in features in Alpha to help you do that. They kind of thought through giving you the hooks and the handles to be able to handle that.
That is great. Well, it is the end of the hour, so I want to thank you, Dan, for presenting. I want to thank everyone who attended and people who asked questions. There are a couple questions we could not get to on time, but please, if you could send them over to guides, Guides, at alphasoftware.com. We'll also try to take a look at them ourselves just from the GoToWebinar control panel. But send them there if you have questions during the week. Also, this session has been recorded, and in a couple days you'll be able to find it at videos.alphasoftware.com. So thanks again for attending, and we hope to see you at a future webinar. Take care, and goodbye.